me, y'all. I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this. I gave y'all 30 years of my career.
Robert.
30 years of my career. Y'all trying to kill me. You killing me, man. This ain't not about music. I'm trying to have a relationship with my kids, and I can't do it. Y'all just don't want to believe the truth.
People close to R. Kelly have long described him as dangerous, even monstrous. Now, a new video from prison has resurfaced, reopening old wounds and leaving his victims shaken. In this breakdown, we'll go through the clip and the shocking state of Kelly's life behind bars. And once crowned the king of R&B, R. Kelly is now serving a 31-year sentence at a federal facility in North Carolina for serious convictions, including racketeering and exploitation crimes. But what's really disturbing are these prison calls which reveal just how far he spiraled mentally. The warning signs were there years ago. Remember that wild 2019 interview with Gale King? Kelly completely unraveled on live TV, shouting and breaking down in front of millions. That meltdown was basically a preview of the unstable behavior we're now hearing in his prison recordings. When Gale pressed him on the repeated allegations, Kelly shouted, "They are lying on me." His paranoia and manipulative mindset were on full display then. The same mindset we're seeing in his latest calls from prison. The most chilling moment came when R. Kelly broke down in that infamous Gale King interview, a breakdown that now feels like a preview of his current mental state in prison. Back then he shouted, "I'm fighting for my life." At the time it sounded dramatic, but now those words hit different because in his recent prison recordings, that same panic is written all over his voice. Even more unsettling is when Kelly once said, "I'm alive."
No idea that this man just beat me on the bus.
My daughter came home, she was 98 pounds. When she left to be with him, she was 120.
I love my brother, you know, but he do have a...
I know the type of monster he...
Now in 2025, that line feels eerie, especially with his new prison tracks where he claims people are out to harm him behind bars. It's like he already sensed the paranoia and isolation he's living through today. When Gale pressed him about the accusations, Kelly tried to flip the narrative, even saying, "This camera on me," in a way that showed he knew how to put on a performance. That same kind of calculated energy is present in his prison recordings now. Only this time, it sounds amplified by pure desperation. This year, Kelly has allegedly been recording music and leaking messages through phone calls from prison, but these aren't just regular freestyles. They feel like carefully crafted messages aimed at pulling sympathy and keeping his name alive. These new prison recordings are being called chilling because Kelly keeps talking about death, poison, and the idea that everyone is out to get him. Things really took off in March 2025 when he jumped on a viral social media challenge, remixing Chris Brown's Residuals through a prison phone call. But instead of being playful like most artists, Kelly's version came off dark and unsettling. What makes it even wilder is comparing his prison voice to his older interviews. In that CBS sit-down with Gale King, you could already hear the desperation rising. And in another tense HuffPost interview, Kelly showed the same defensive streak, shutting down tough questions, getting angry, and trying to flip the script. That same pattern has followed him for years. Whenever challenged, he'd deflect or lash out. Now, those same traits are showing up in his prison recordings, but with a new twist. They're dripping with fear and isolation. Instead of sounding like a performer in control, he sounds like someone trapped in paranoia, convinced the world is closing in on him. In prison, R. Kelly's victim mentality has turned into something much darker. One audio clip spread across TikTok and Instagram with Kelly asking, "Who's getting all my checks?" about his royalties. But it wasn't just the lyrics. It was that raw prison phone vibe that split opinions. Some called it heartbreaking, while others said it was flat out chilling because you could hear the fear in his voice. By May 2025, a track titled "They Trying to Poison Me in Jail" appeared on YouTube. Pitched as a vulnerable ballad, Kelly claimed prison staff were out to harm him. As months passed, the songs grew darker and more desperate. By June, titles like "I'm Not Safe in Prison" and "I Heard the Guards Say Kill Him" surfaced online. These didn't sound like typical songs. They felt more like frantic SOS messages from a man spiraling in paranoia. From his infamous 2019 Gale King interview to these 2025 recordings, the slide into psychological collapse is clear. Back then, he talked about being buried alive and fighting for his life. Now those words feel literal. The once celebrated star reduced to shaky phone calls, convinced everyone is out to get him. What makes these prison recordings disturbing isn't just the lyrics, it's what they reveal about Kelly's mental state. The themes stay dark, full of fear, paranoia, and talk of death. The big question is whether these are genuine threats he's facing or signs of a collapsing mind. Either way, it raises tough conversations about prison reform and the treatment of high-profile inmates. The timing was also suspicious. These recordings started surfacing just as his legal team filed court papers in June 2025, requesting early release and claiming there was a real plot against him in prison. It feels like the same strategy we saw before trial, using media and public sympathy to boost his case. Now here's the twist. Federal prisons are strict. No recording devices allowed. These aren't music videos filmed inside. They're jail phone calls, later dressed up with AI visuals or stock prison footage by people on the outside. It's basically an underground system built to put Kelly's voice back on the streets. But are they all real? At least one viral video turned out to be fully AI generated. Still, others are clearly authentic, like a March 2025 phone call where Kelly performed his old hit When a Woman's Fed Up Lived Through a Prison line. The emotions in these recordings are raw, but the context makes them hit even harder. This is a man who once sold out arenas, now reduced to singing through a prison phone for a small podcast audience. Compare that vulnerable voice to the defiant Kelly in those old HuffPost interviews when he stormed off, still clinging to control and pride. That version is gone. The man calling into podcasts today sounds broken, isolated, and genuinely afraid. As 2025 went on, the recordings only got darker. The most recent release in August was a track called It's August and Still in Prison Again, produced by Lil R3 Vibe. In it, Kelly laments his continued incarceration, reminding everyone that despite appeals and legal maneuvers, he remains behind bars with little chance of release anytime soon. Looking back at those 2019 Gale King moments, his words feel almost prophetic. When he cried about being buried alive and fighting for his life, it now sounds like he was predicting his own fate. Now, let's get real about life behind federal prison walls, because understanding Kelly's daily reality is key to grasping why these recordings feel so disturbing. The fall from global superstar to federal inmate may be one of the most dramatic collapses in R&B and hip-hop history. FCI Butner Medium I in North Carolina, the federal prison where R. Kelly has been housed since April 2023, is a medium security facility with medical units and a history of holding high-profile inmates like Bernie Madoff. For Kelly, transferred there after stints in Chicago and other centers, this place is likely home for decades to come. His projected release date is December 21st, 2045. If that stands, he'll be 78 years old by the time he walks free. So what does daily life actually look like for him? The routine is a world away from his superstar days. As a convicted offender, he's likely kept in protective custody, away from general population for safety reasons. That means 22 to 23 hours locked in a cell with just 1 hour of recreation, often alone. No group programs, no church services, and very limited contact with others. Court filings even reveal he's been placed in solitary confinement at times for his own safety. That level of isolation takes an even heavier toll, stripping away what little freedom protective custody allows. Experts say this kind of long-term isolation can crush someone's mental health, and the fact he's moved in and out of solitary shows that the threats against him aren't just paranoia. Officials are taking them seriously. The psychological toll of this kind of isolation is brutal, especially for someone like R. Kelly, who once fed off the energy of sold-out crowds. For a man who lived for the rush of performing, the silence of a solitary cell is the exact opposite of everything he once knew. Prison medical care is technically provided, but his legal team has claimed he isn't getting proper treatment, even hinting at a serious illness in a 2025 filing. The details are private due to medical laws, but it adds another layer to his decline behind bars. What makes his situation especially dangerous is his status in the prison hierarchy. In the unwritten prison code, people convicted of crimes involving minors are placed at the very bottom, even below murderers or major drug dealers. That reality often means constant threats, targeted violence, and complete isolation from other inmates. History shows how risky that position can be. Infamous cases like Jeffrey Dahmer in 1994 and Jared Fogle in 2016 highlight the dangers faced by high-profile offenders. For Kelly, every day inside brings a mix of fear, paranoia, and survival. A complete fall from grace for someone who once ruled R&B. The constant threat of violence has clearly worn down R. Kelly's mental state, which is obvious in the paranoid and fearful tone of his 2025 recordings. His lawyers have even cited threats from gangs and corrupt prison staff, claiming his life is in danger. How he still manages to create music from prison is wild. Reports say Kelly has written dozens of songs, even claiming 25 albums worth since being locked up. But the reality is harsh. Federal inmates have almost no access to recording gear. The only outlet is monitored phone calls, which officials record and review closely. Every word he speaks could be used against him later. The irony is heavy. A man who once had access to world-class studios now relies on the same phone line other inmates use just to call family or lawyers. Through those calls, some of his darkest tracks have surfaced, including one from June 2025 where he claimed to hear threats from inside the prison itself. On top of that, the financial side of prison life weighs him down. His royalties are being taken for debts and restitution, leaving him with little to cover legal fees or even commissary basics. For Kelly, it's a spiral of fear, isolation, and financial collapse. Photos from February 2025 show R. Kelly in standard prison attire, aged but composed. Yet those still shots don't reveal the toll isolation and fear have taken on someone who once thrived on commanding a stage. By June 2025, reports claimed Kelly was placed in solitary confinement and given heavy medication, leading to a collapse that sent him to a hospital in Durham for several days. His attorneys described it as a serious threat to his safety, filing court papers suggesting foul play inside the prison system. Officials, however, have remained largely silent, citing ongoing legal matters, a silence that only fuels more speculation about what really happened behind bars. Whether it was medical mishandling, conflict with staff, or the weight of his own mental health struggles, the result has been the same. Kelly's world is defined by fear and uncertainty. Adding to that isolation, his family, including ex-wife Drea Kelly and their children, reportedly do not visit. Most of his contact is limited to attorneys, staff, and the occasional monitored call. Even small privileges, like a prison tablet for communication, come with delays and restrictions. Every move, every word, every interaction is tightly controlled. For someone who once controlled every detail of his world, R. Kelly's complete loss of freedom marks a dramatic shift. Now known in the system as just another inmate, his story is no longer about fame. It's about how the law finally caught up with a man who once thought he was untouchable. Kelly's legal troubles stretch back decades. The first major scandal came in 1994 when he secretly married rising star Aaliyah, using falsified documents to hide her real age. The marriage was annulled in 1995, but it set off a storm of controversy that would follow him for years. Not long after, in 1996, Tiffany Hawkins filed a lawsuit accusing Kelly of misconduct that allegedly began when she was just 15. She claims she was manipulated into situations with older people, painting a disturbing picture that went far beyond a single relationship. The case was settled in 1998 for $250,000, but it exposed a clear pattern, using money and legal agreements to silence accusations. From that point forward, lawsuit after lawsuit piled up, showing a long trail of troubling behavior. What once looked like isolated scandals became a mountain of evidence, and the beginning of the end for the so-called king of R&B. For years, R. Kelly's playbook was simple: deny, deflect, and try to silence accusations. In 2002, a disturbing video surfaced allegedly showing him with an underage girl, leading to charges in Chicago. The footage was shocking enough to bring serious criminal counts, yet in 2008 he was acquitted after the victim chose not to testify. That acquittal wasn't due to lack of evidence. Multiple witnesses said they recognized both Kelly and the girl in the tape. Instead, it exposed how difficult it can be to prosecute cases when victims feel pressured, intimidated, or simply too ashamed to testify. What looked like a win for Kelly turned out to be temporary. Years later, that same tape would resurface as key evidence in his 2022 conviction. The case eventually expanded far beyond individual allegations. With the rise of the Nabber Me Too movement and the 2019 docuseries Surviving R. Kelly, the world got a closer look at the scale of the accusations. More than 20 women came forward, describing patterns of grooming, control, and psychological manipulation. The documentary was a turning point. It put faces and voices to the allegations, showing that this wasn't just about rumors or court filings. It was about a systematic pattern that had gone on for decades, and it could no longer be ignored. The federal investigations that followed were massive, led by the FBI and Homeland Security. For the first time, Kelly wasn't treated like a star who made mistakes, but as the leader of a criminal network. This changed everything because it allowed prosecutors to frame his actions as part of a decades-long pattern instead of isolated incidents. In February 2019, he was charged in Illinois with multiple counts of criminal abuse. Just months later, in July, federal prosecutors hit him with racketeering and trafficking charges in New York, plus additional federal cases in Chicago. The New York trial, which began in August 2021 and lasted 6 weeks, laid out a devastating case. Prosecutors described Kelly as running an organized operation under RICO laws built to recruit and control women. More than 45 witnesses testified, including 11 accusers, and their accounts painted a disturbing picture of rules, manipulation, and psychological control inside his circle. The testimony was overwhelming. It stripped away Kelly's celebrity image and replaced it with the image of a man running a calculated system of abuse. It was one of the most shocking courtroom moments in modern music history. Courtroom evidence showed just how far R. Kelly's operation went. Former employees testified about forged documents for his illegal marriage to Aaliyah, along with contracts, NDAS, and even videos used to control people around him. This wasn't about random incidents. It was a carefully built system designed to isolate and exploit vulnerable women. On September 27, 2021, Kelly was convicted on all 9 counts in New York, 1 racketeering charge and 8 violations under the Mann Act, which involved transporting women across state lines for illegal purposes. It was a landmark conviction, proving that even powerful figures could finally be held accountable. But the fight wasn't over. In 2022, Kelly went back on trial in Chicago for charges tied to the infamous 2002 video. This time, the victim herself, Jane, testified and confirmed her role, providing the missing evidence that derailed the 2008 trial. Prosecutors also presented proof that Kelly and his team tried to hide tapes and intimidate witnesses. On September 14, 2022, Kelly was convicted on 6 of 13 counts, including production of illegal material and enticement. While acquitted on some charges, the convictions added decades to his sentence. Judge Ann Donnelly ultimately handed him 30 years for the New York case, citing his decades of harm and complete lack of remorse. The judge made it clear R. Kelly had shown no remorse and remained a danger to society. On February 23, 2023, he was sentenced to another 20 years for his Chicago convictions. 19 of those years run alongside his New York sentence, but 1 year was added on, plus lifetime supervision, heavy fines, and restitution. The ruling ensured that Kelly will almost certainly spend the rest of his life in federal custody. The appeals process only sealed his fate. In June 2023, the Second Circuit upheld his New York conviction. By April 2024, the Seventh Circuit rejected his Chicago appeal. Finally, in July 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his petition, closing the door on any chance of overturning his convictions. Kelly's downfall became bigger than just one case. It reshaped how prosecutors handle celebrity crimes. Using RICO and trafficking laws influenced by the Me Too movement and documentaries like Surviving R. Kelly, federal prosecutors showed that fame and money can't shield you from justice. The financial fallout has been just as crushing. His royalties are being seized for debts and restitution, and over $10 million in victim payments have been ordered. The man who once made millions from hits now faces a future defined by prison walls and lost fortune. What was once a music empire worth millions has now been dismantled, with the money redirected to help those harmed by R. Kelly rebuild their lives. The empire he created is being used against him as victims continue to fight for restitution. In fact, in February 2025, a lawsuit was filed to enforce an unpaid $10.3 million judgment, proving these battles aren't slowing down anytime soon. The victims are relentless, making sure Kelly pays every penny he owes. His downfall from the king of R&B to federal inmate number 90,888 isn't just the story of one man's collapse. It's a landmark case showing how the justice system is finally holding powerful figures accountable, no matter their fame or fortune. Kelly's case has become a blueprint for prosecuting celebrity crimes, proving that wealth, influence, and status can't shield someone from justice. For years, the streets whispered that something wasn't right. Now the courts have made it official. And that's the story. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment on this video. I want to hear your thoughts on this shocking fall from grace.